All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending the ICN's Virtual Cybersecurity Roadshow. This is the fourth year we've done a customer event as part of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and we're grateful to have you spend a little bit of your day with us. This year, we're focusing on the actions to take when the inevitable happens. So, what happens and what do we do when there's a security incident or a security breach? We'll walk through what to include in your incident response plan. I'll look over a sample template that you can fill in and have a quick, easy, formal incident response plan and procedures for your organization. We also demonstrate methods for identifying malicious activity through the use of open source tools and see an attacker's perspective for multiple types of attacks. Uh, Quick housekeeping note, this session is being recorded and will be added to our website within the next week or so. So you can come and go as you please and look later on demand if you want. So my name is Ryan Mulhall. I'm the Network Services Bureau Chief here at the ICN. Our security team, our application developers, our outside plant fiber team, and our inside plant structured cabling teams roll up to me. This picture is old, so I still have a smile on my face. So definitely right at the beginning of my time here working at the ICN, and not a recent one. But I've been in technology leadership and management for about 11 years now. 5 of those have been with the ICN. Just most of my experience when it comes to security is here as well as in the military. And so I'm going to kind of be walking through the administrative side of the incident response process. And with me to walk through the more technical aspects is our security architect and lead, Mike Van Haften, who will introduce himself now as well.
So I'm Mike Van Haften. I've been kind of around the IT world. Originally started off doing programming and sysadmin, netadmin, and just really loved all of technology and discovered that kind of the only spot that really fit for me with that wide of background was security. So that's kind of where I ended up. I've been working in IT in one form or another since probably before 2000. I also have spent some time in the DoD, warrant officer in that capacity. But here for the ICN, my main focus is around looking at new products and development and making sure that when we're introducing or updating systems that they are done in a secure manner, as well as trying to come forward with additional security options for customers and things like that. At this point, I'll hand it back to you, Ryan.
All right. Thank you, Mike. So we're just going to jump right into the first part. Is again, it's kind of more the administrative side of the house and the leadership side. So in the kind of the planning and the preparation, what to do when you're putting together your incident response plan for your organization, and some tips and tricks and things that you want to make sure that you have in there. And then again at the end, we'll kind of go over a sample template incident response plan that you can just make some quick changes, insert some details, and have a fully baked out formal incident response plan and some procedures for your organization. So this is from The Hobbit. I believe that Smaug is the dragon's name. And I like this quote: "Does not do to leave a live dragon out of your calculations if you live near one." So I can just tell you now, in the sectors that we operate in, the healthcare, the education, the state and federal government, and the public safety entities, as well as ourselves, we are most definitely a target. Make no mistake that there are nation states and criminals out there that want our information, or even had the opportunity to spend a good amount of time one-on-one with the CIO and a CISO from a neighboring state, and they walked through some of the issues that they face. And one jumped out at me was from the education sector. They had a school that was doing a STEM program, and they were doing robotics, and they're using a lot of Internet of Things type devices to be able to program and control and do those things, over the web. And those create some vulnerabilities that allowed a nation state, one, they you might know them as the Democratic Republic of North Korea. They're certainly probably not a democratic republic, but they were able to use those exploits and to be able to get into that school's network and into the overall state's network, which included the National Guard. And their National Guard in this particular state has quite a bit to do with the nuclear defense capabilities in response. So they were using that as a way to, that school and those Internet of Things devices that they were using to try to get into the National Guard and the DoD network. So with the way we're all interconnected, it's every single one of us is most definitely a target. So in our kind of planning and preparation for that, just have to realize that we are targets, we are vulnerable, and protecting ourselves and knowing what to do when the inevitable happens is paramount. So just real quick, what is cybersecurity? Cybersecurity is the art of protecting networks, devices, and data from unauthorized access or criminal use, and the practice of ensuring confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. One of the things that I really like to look at when it comes to security is I really think it's the story of two things. That's visibility and risk. You want as much visibility as you possibly can and the least amount of risk that you possibly can. When it comes to risk management is definitely one of the goals and one of the best practices of your security program. And again, risk is just basically two things: the likelihood and that something's going to happen, and the impact of it if it does happen. So, as you're kind of, formulating incident response plans and trying to be prepared for some of the different scenarios and different attacks that are out there. Obviously, you want to start with those things that, at the top right, the critical and the highs. It has a high likelihood of impact of happening, and be a high impact if there was to be a security incident or a breach. So, obviously we want to get things down to where there's no impact. So, the organization's ability to provide all our services to all users, that's the goal. That's probably not feasible. So, low minimal effect, the organization can still provide all critical services to all users, but has lost efficiency. Medium, the organization has lost the ability to provide a critical service to a subset of system users. And high, the organization is no longer able to provide critical services to any users. Incident response is the organized approach to addressing and managing the aftermath of a security breach or cyber attack. Also can be known as IT incident, computer incident, security incident. The goal is to handle the situation in a way that limits damage and reduces recovery time and costs. Some of the resources that we're going to utilize today as we go through our little workshop and planning scenario. NIST Special Publication 800-61 Revision 2. That's the Computer Security Incident Handling Guide. That was most recently updated in 2012. Iowa Code 715C, Personal Information Security Breach Protection. That is just some specific rules to Iowa that you should be aware of when it comes to security incidents and especially breaches. And then, of course, the sample incident response plan and procedures that was sent out shortly before this started. So establishing an incident response capability and why this should be a part of your program. Organizations should be prepared to respond quickly and effectively when some computer security defenses are breached. So the incident response policy is the foundation of the incident response program. You can use that to define which events are considered incidents, establish the organizational structure for incident response, define roles and responsibilities, and list requirements for reporting incidents, amongst many other items that you could potentially put in there. So the incident response plan provides a roadmap for implementing an incident response program based on that policy. So the plan Should generally include both short and long-term goals for the program, including metrics for measuring the program. The incident response plan should also indicate how often incident handlers are trained and requirements for incident handlers. The incident response procedures provide detailed steps for responding to an incident. A lot of times you'll hear this called a playbook as well. The procedure should cover all the phases of the incident response process. The procedure should be based on the incident response policy and plan as well. The organization should communicate appropriate incident details with outside parties. This can include the media, law enforcement agencies, as well as incident reporting organizations. The incident response team should discuss this with other areas, public affairs office, potentially legal department and management that establishes policies and procedures as in regards to information sharing about an incident. So again, this team should always comply with existing organization policy when it comes to interacting with media and other outside parties. When reporting and providing pertinent information to other organizations beneficial, CISA, and which is the Federal Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, as well as ISACs. ISACs are information sharing organizations handled by the government for different sectors. They use the reported data to provide information regarding new threats and incident trends, as well as have some things that can help us. So healthcare has an ISAC. We take part in the multi-state ISAC, which is a state, local, tribal government entity. We take part also in the overall communications ISAC, which is kind of the umbrella above all of them, being in the communications sector like the ICN is. Additionally, organizations should carefully weigh the advantages and disadvantages of the team structure and staffing models of an incident response team as it relates to organizations' needs and, of course, available resources, which a lot of times are scarce. The credibility and proficiency of the team depend to a large extent on the technical skills and critical thinking abilities of the members. And of course, they need necessary training should be provided to all team members as well. So just every incident response team relies on the expertise, judgment, and abilities of other teams. So that includes management, security teams, information, IT support teams, legal, public affairs, facility management. If it's a physical security issue, this should touch almost every area of an organization. And although the main focus of the team is incident response, some teams can perform additional functions that can include monitoring intrusion detection sensors and tools, distributing security advisories, and educating users on security. Again, this is kind of the focus on what happens when something does happen, but prevention is still key. Some of the prevention activities that we can do include risk assessments, host security, making sure that all hosts are hardened appropriately using standard configurations, as well as keeping them properly patched and following the principle of least privilege, granting users only the privileges necessary for performing their authorized tasks. And auditing should also be enabled and should be able to log significant security related events. And if you can log everything, that's even better. And then the security of hosts and their configurations should be continuously monitored. Network security, so the network perimeter should be configured to deny all activity that's not expressly permitted. This includes securing all connection points, such as VPNs, dedicated connections to other organizations. And of course, a lot of times this would be your firewall. And if you're using next-gen firewall with UTM capability, that would kind of be how you protect your perimeter. Malware prevention, that's software to detect and stop malware, should be deployed throughout the organization. So you want at the host level, server and workstation operating systems, application level, and email server, web proxies, and the like, as well as anywhere else that you can potentially send that out to. And then the last piece of prevention, user awareness and training. Again, users should be made aware of policies and procedures regarding appropriate use of networks, systems, and applications. Applicable lessons learned from previous incidents should also be shared with users so they can see how their actions could affect the organization. Just overall, improving user awareness regarding incidents should reduce the frequency of incidents. And a lot of times you see the industry numbers that 90% of all security breaches and security incidents start with a phishing email these days. Additionally, your IT staff should be trained so they can maintain their network systems and applications in accordance with the organization's security standards and policies. So organizations should be prepared to handle any incident, but should focus on being prepared to handle incidents that use those common attack vectors. Incidents occur in countless ways, so it would be almost impossible to develop step-by-step instructions for handling every incident. Some common attack vectors that you should be preparing for: external removable media, so an attack executed from flash drives, CDs, peripheral devices. Attrition, which is an attack that employs brute force methods to compromise, degrade, or destroy systems, networks, or services. Web attacks is an attack executed from a website or web-based application. Email, an attack executed via email, message, or attachment. Improper usage, any incident resulting from violation of an organization's acceptable use policies by an authorized user. Loss or theft of equipment, that again, just what it sounds like, the loss or theft of a computing device or media used by the organization, such as a laptop or smartphone. So events versus incidents. So an event is any observable occurrence in a system or network. Events can include connecting to a file share, a server receiving a request for a web page, user sending an email, a firewall blocking a connection attempt. There are usually thousands or hundreds of thousands of these going on at any given time, depending on the size of a network. A security incident is a violation or imminent threat of violation of computer security policies, acceptable use policies, or standard security practice. An example of these incidents can include an attacker commanding a botnet to send high volumes of connection requests to a web server, causing it to crash, or a DDoS attack. Users are tricked into opening an attachment sent via email that is actually malware, and now their computer is infected, and they've established a connection with an external host. Ransomware, disgruntled users provide or expose sensitive information to others, are just examples of security incidents. Communications is going to be a big part of any incident response policy and plan and procedures. So the incident response team, or whoever's responsible to respond to the incident, does have to collaborate with other entities. That can include other areas of the organization. It can include customers, constituents, the media, your internet service provider, law enforcement agencies, software and support vendors, and the like. So as an example, as the ICN, as a lot of your organization's ISP, some of the things that we can do, we can provide assistance in blocking major network-based attacks or tracing its origin. We can block DDoS attacks or mitigate them with some of the things that we have in place, or we can just black hole traffic and isolate customer networks. We have a lot of information. We have a lot of visibility into what's going on. We can get a lot of detail and provide you with some of the things that we see hitting you guys from the outside world and from the internet as well. Owners of attacking addresses. So if they're originating from an external organization's IP address space, there's a way to get in contact with designated security contacts for those organizations to alert them to activity, ask them to collect evidence. Software vendors, so we can, it's good to contact these in the case of needing help getting significance of certain log entries or known false positives from some intrusion detection signatures, perhaps, where minimal information regarding the incident may need to be revealed. Sometimes there's more information that needs to be provided. So if a server appears to have been compromised through an unknown software vulnerability, software vendors may also be able to provide information on some of the known threats to help organizations understand our current threat environment a little bit more. One other thing I want to bring up is reporting to law enforcement. It's definitely something that that you should do. one reason many security-related incidents don't result in convictions is that organizations don't properly contact law enforcement. There are several levels of law enforcement available to investigate incidents. For example, within the U.S., federal investigatory agencies like the FBI, the Secret Service. You have district attorney's office on the state and local level. You got state law enforcement, as well as local, county and city law enforcement. Now, if you reach out to some of these entities, they might not be able to help you recover from the attack or help you get one under control. But again, why it's helpful to report these are in the cases of just so they have a record and so they can identify those trends and those patterns and hopefully be able to collaborate and a lot of times it is coming from overseas entities and being able to get the evidence and use their jurisdiction to be able to try to get other governments to help break some of these up. All right, so now kind of jumping into incident handling and the incident response lifecycle. So the incident response process has several phases. The initial phase involves establishing and training an incident response team, acquiring necessary tools and resources to do so. So during preparation, the organization also attempts to limit the number of incidents that will occur by selecting and implementing a set of controls, generally based on the results of risk assessments that are done. However, residual risk will inevitably persist after controls are implemented. So detection of security breaches is thus necessary to alert the organization whenever incidents occur. In keeping with the severity of the incident, the organization can mitigate the impact of the incident by containing it and ultimately recovering from it. So during the preparation phase, often activity cycles back to detection and analysis. For example, to see if additional hosts are infected by malware while eradicating a malware incident. After the incident is adequately handled, the organization issues a report to detail the cause and cost of the incident and the steps the organization should take to prevent future incidents. So again, the incident preparation phase, a lot of time what you're doing here is getting your incident handler communications and your facilities ready for when a security incident occurs. So some of the things that you want to make sure that you have contact information for team members and others within and outside the organization, such as law enforcement and other incident response teams. Some of the information you want to include phone numbers, emails, perhaps public encryption keys if needed, and instructions for verifying a contact's identity. On-call information for other teams within the organization, including escalation information, your incident reporting mechanisms, again, phone numbers, email addresses, online forms, those things that users can use to report suspected incidents. An issue tracking system for tracking incident information, status, etc. This could be your ITSM, wherever you're keeping help and support tickets. Smartphones to be carried by team members for off-hour support and on-site communications. A war room for central communication and coordination. Permanent war rooms not necessary or practical. The team should create a procedure for procuring a temporary space when needed. Secure storage facilities for securing evidence and other sensitive materials. Some of the tools that you want to have handy in your incident analysis, hardware and software, digital forensic workstations and or backup devices to create images, preserve log files, and save other relevant incident data. Laptops for activities such as analyzing data with sniffing packets, writing reports. Spare workstation servers and networking equipment or virtualized equivalent, which may be used for many purposes, such as restoring backups and sandboxing malware, blank removable media, packet sniffers and protocol analyzers to capture and analyze network traffic, removable media with trusted versions of programs that can be used to gather evidence from systems, and then evidence gathering accessories to include notebooks, digital cameras, audio recorders, chain of custody forms, evidence storage bags and tags to preserve evidence for possible legal actions. And some of your analysis resources, port lists, including commonly used ports and Trojan horse ports, documentation for your operating systems, applications, protocols, intrusion detection and antivirus products, network diagrams and list of critical assets such as database servers, current baselines of expected network system application activity, and then access to images of clean operating system and application installations for restoration and recovery purposes. The next step in the life cycle, detection and analysis. So incidents can occur in countless ways. So again, it isn't feasible to develop step-by-step instructions for handling every incident. Organizations should be generally prepared to handle any incident, but should focus on being prepared to handle incidents that use common attack vectors talked about earlier. For many organizations, the most challenging part of the incident response process is accurately detecting and assessing possible incidents. So determining whether an incident has occurred, and if so, the type, extent, and magnitude of the problem. Signs of an incident fall into 1 to 2 categories, precursors and indicators. So a precursor is a sign that an incident may occur in the future, and an indicator is a sign that an incident may have occurred or may be occurring now. So some of the sources of these precursors and indicators of compromise, so your alerts from your intrusion detection and prevention appliances, or if it's in the network, or the software on your actual workstations, SIM, security information and event management, antivirus, file integrity checking software, third-party monitoring services are all sources of alerts. Logs, again, you should be able to hopefully collect logs for just about everything going on for every piece of gear within your network. Publicly available information, and then of course the last, people. Our people can be our greatest sensor of knowing when something's wrong, and training them to come forward when you know, there's the potential of an incident. It can pay great dividends in containing and recovering. So the documentation that you want to prepare on an incident. So again, the incident response team should maintain records about the status of incidents along with other pertinent information. Use an application or a database, such as an issue tracking system or ITSM system, helps ensure that incidents are handled and resolved in a timely manner. Some of the documentation should include what you see here on the slide. So current status of the incident, kind of a summary, indicators, if there's any relation to other incidents, being able to make that connection, actions taken, business impact assessment analysis, contact information, and then of course next steps that should be taken. Prioritizing the handling of the incident, perhaps the most critical decision point in the incident handling process. So incidents should not be handled on a first come, first served basis. This is due to resource limitations that of course we all have when it comes to security. So instead, handling should be prioritized based on the relevant factors. Some of these include the functional impact of the incident. Incidents targeting IT systems typically impact the business functionality that those systems provide. This results in some type of negative impact to the users of those systems. Incident handlers should consider how the incident will impact the existing functionality of affected systems. Incident handlers should also consider not only the current functional impact of the incident, but also the likely future functional impact of the incident if it's not immediately contained. The information impact of the incident. So again, incidents may affect confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the organization's information. An example of this would be a malicious agent could exfiltrate sensitive information. So incident handlers should consider how this information exfiltration will impact the organization's overall mission. The incident that results in the exfiltration of sensitive information may also affect other organizations if any of the data pertain to a partner organization or a customer. Recoverability from the incident is the last prioritization consideration. So the size of the incident and the type of resources effects will determine the amount of time and resources that we spend on recovering from that incident. In some instances, it's not possible to recover from an incident. For example, the confidentiality of sensitive information has been compromised. It would not make sense to spend limited resources on an elongated incident handling cycle unless that effort was directed at ensuring that a similar incident doesn't occur in the future. In other cases, an incident may require far more resources to handle than what an organization has available. Incident handlers should consider the effort necessary to actually recover from an incident and carefully weigh that against the value recovery effort will create in any requirements related to incident handling. Notification. So when that incident's analyzed and prioritized, the incident response team needs to notify the appropriate individuals so that all who need to be involved will play their roles. So incident response policies should include provisions concerning incident reporting. At a minimum, must be reported to whom at what times. For example, initial notification, regular status updates. Again, these exact reporting requirements are going to vary amongst organizations, but some of the parties that are typically notified include CIO and other executives, head of information security, other incident response teams, external incident response teams, the system owner, HR, public affairs, legal department, and law enforcement if appropriate. Containment, eradication, and recovery. So containment's most important before an incident overwhelms resources or increases damage. Most incidents require containment, so that is an important consideration early in the course of handling an incident. Containment provides time for developing a tailored remediation strategy. Containment strategies vary based on the type of incident. An example would be the strategy for containing an email-borne malware infection is quite different from that of a network-based DDoS attack. Organizations should create separate containment strategies for each major incident type with criteria documented clearly to facilitate decision-making. Potential damage to and theft of resources, need for evidence preservation, service availability such as network connectivity, services provided to external parties, time and resources needed to implement the strategy, effectiveness of the strategy, duration of the solution are all things that should be taken into account. After an incident has been contained, eradication may be necessary to eliminate components of the incident, such as deleting malware, disabling breached user accounts, as well as identifying and mitigating all vulnerabilities that were exploited. During eradication, it's important to identify all affected hosts within the organization so that they can be remediated. In recovery, administrators restore systems to normal operation, confirm the systems are functioning normally, and if applicable, remediate vulnerabilities to prevent similar incidents. Recovery may involve such actions as restoring systems from clean backups, rebuilding systems from scratch, replacing compromised files with clean versions, installing patches, changing passwords, and tightening network perimeter security such as firewall rule sets and boundary router access control lists. And the last thing we want to perform as part of our incident response capability is the post-incident activity. So one of the most important parts is often the one that's omitted the most. That's learning and improving. So each incident response team should evolve to reflect new threats, improve technology, and incorporate lessons learned. So questions to be answered during this meeting or post-incident activity include exactly what happened and what time, how well did staff and management perform in dealing with the incident, were the documented procedures followed, were they adequate, what information was needed sooner, were any steps or actions taken that might have inhibited the recovery, what would the staff and management do differently the next time a similar incident occurs, how could information sharing with other organizations been improved, what corrective actions can prevent similar incidents in the future, what precursors or indicators should be watched for in the future to detect similar incidents, and last, what additional tools or resources are needed to detect, analyze, and mitigate future incidents. Some of the collected data and metrics you should use to measure your incident response capability and program. Number of incidents handled. Handling more incidents is not necessarily better. For example, the number of incidents handled may decrease because of better network and host security controls and not because of the negligence by incident response team. Number of incidents handled is best taken as a measure of the relative amount of work that's had to be performed by the incident response team, not as a measure of the quality of the team, unless it's considered in the context of other measures that collectively give an indication of that work quality. It is more effective to produce separate incident counts for each incident category, so subcategories also can be used to provide more information. For example, a growing number of incidents performed by insiders could prompt stronger policy provisions concerning background investigations for personnel and misuse of computing resources, and stronger security controls on internal networks. Time per incident for each incident, time can be measured in several ways. Total amount of labor spent working on the incident, elapsed time from the beginning of the incident to incident discovery, to the initial impact assessment, and to each stage of the incident handling process, such as containment and recovery. How long it took the incident response team to respond to the initial report, how long it took to report the incident to management and the appropriate external entities. An objective assessment of each incident, so the response to an incident that's been resolved can be analyzed to determine how effective it was. Some examples of performing an objective assessment include reviewing logs, forms, reports, other incident documentation for adherence to established incident response policies and procedures, identifying which precursors and indicators of the incident were recorded to determine how effectively the incident was logged and identified, determining if the incident caused damage before it was detected. So determining if the actual cause of the incident was identified and identifying the vector of attack, the vulnerabilities exploited, and the characteristics of the targeted or victimized systems, network, and applications. Determining if the incident is a recurrence of a previous incident, calculating estimated monetary damage from the incident, measuring the difference between the initial impact assessment and the final impact assessment. Those are some examples of subjective assessment of each incident. All right, so now that we've kind of gone over a lot of information about incident response capabilities and the policy plan and procedure portion, now would be a good time to open up the sample incident response plan and procedures that was sent out before the meeting. And again, this is just kind of a compilation of different templates and different things and capabilities that we've utilized here at the ICN to kind of come up with our formal incident response plan and procedures. Give me 1 second here. Let that open up. So again, we tried to make this as easy as possible so you could have a takeaway and something you could act in your organization. So if you note the highlighted portion at the top, any highlighted area, that's where you're going to want to input specific information to your organization. And that's going to be able to tailor this plan and procedure for a quick, easy plan. So just some of the quick highlights. Still opening, sorry, I should open that up beforehand. So just one, on the notification of the incident. Again, these alerts or whoever discovers the indicators of an incident. It can be anybody. It could be, a formal security team that's and security analysts that are looking at logs and getting alerts from, a SIM or a firewall or a tool. It can come from an outside entity. It can come from anybody, but just you want to make sure what happens when somebody does that they know who to report it to. And then that notified entity, they're going to kind of provide the initial analysis. They document the response as they pertain to the affected information systems, information, or assets. Still opening. All right. All right. Well, I guess instead of holding that up any further, again, if you want to go through that and kind of tailor it to your organization, some of those things include some of those common attack vectors. You can start putting in some of your playbook type things, as well as documenting who all needs to be involved from your organization, some of the external entities you need to involve or alert or notify and communicate with, as well as one important piece in there as well is I think it's good practice to have, some outside help ready and willing to go. There's a couple good companies in Iowa, Pratum, ProCircular, amongst others, that can help out in the instance of a security incident or breach that is outside, our internal capabilities. Oh, there we go, perfect. And of course, now it opens. So I will go ahead and turn it over to the kind of technical portion of this. If there are any questions about, like I said, the sample incident response plan and procedures, or what you've seen in the presentation, we will be happy to take those at the end, or we can get at those offline. But thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's time again today, and look forward to speaking to you later. Take it away, Mike.
All right, this is my portion now. So the first, starting off, we've kind of got two different angles of the same event. We've got how the event took place from the attacker's perspective, and we've got how the event took place from the defender's perspective. So kind of like Zork style, I'm going to let you pick your own adventure. So if you go ahead and open up your chat, if you put a plus in the chat, that means that you want to start with the defender side. If you put a minus in the chat, that means you want to start with the attacker side. So we'll give you a couple seconds here to okay. It's looking like the minuses are winning. All right, everybody wants to see the attacker. Okay. All right, so let me go ahead and get this started. And all right, just want to make sure everybody's seeing my screen. I'm assuming they are. We've got the evil actions attacker up there. Okay, I'm going to take silence as yes. All right, so starting off here, basically what I've got for my attacker system is I used a single Kali Linux virtual machine. And this is just simply a Ubuntu-based distribution that comes pre-packed with some pen testing, auditing type tools. So for people that, have kind of followed this stuff, back in the day, it used to be called Backtrack. Before that, it was called Auditor. And that's been, this is a fork of a fork. So they've kind of gone off in their own direction. But that link there is actually where I pulled it from. That's Offensive Security. If you've ever heard of OSCP, they put together like pen tester training methods and things like that. First of all, I guess I should start off with, I'm not a pen tester. I've done some OSCP stuff, so I can fumble my way through, but this is definitely not a sophisticated attack, and you'll see that as we start going through here, as far as it's going to be pretty easy to catch this one, quite honestly. So the first thing that I did when I got into my system here is I made sure that I could actually run a port scan. Just did a quick one of a device that I had setting inside my isolated environment. Oh, by the way, this is all isolated. None of this traffic actually went out onto the internet. So don't worry if you see actual IPs that you recognize pop up here. So this is just a quick one against a Linux Mint box that I had sitting there, and just came back in 14 seconds. So then I move on, and I actually scan against the IP address, the external IP address of my victim. So that's the 165.206.188.2. And you can see that this one actually comes back saying that I only have one port open, and that's that 3128, and it's running a web proxy. And if you notice here down at the bottom, I kind of selected or highlighted that that one took substantially longer. Again, could I have reformatted this Nmap scan, ran it multi-threaded and things like that to make it come back faster? Yeah, I could have done that. But again, how you set up your tools and what responses you give to the attacker, if they're, running just basic scripting or basic commands without putting more effort into it, it's going to take them longer depending on how you actually have your equipment configured. So then from here, since I knew that I had that that one port open and that it was a proxy, I went ahead and started up my Metasploit, and they have this convenient little squid proxy pivot scan. So I went ahead and loaded up the module to do a squid pivot scan on that system or against that IP address. And I kind of checked the module options for what things I had to configure to make this work. So the next step is I actually went ahead and set my configurations for those options. So I set the range to actually hit the loopback because I'm intending to run this scan through the proxy. And then I set it to the proxy's IP address and the port of the proxy. So then I just do I let Metasploit run its scan, and it sees that port 80 is available. Actually, I should jump back here. If you'll notice here under ports, there is a list of ports. It's not doing every single port on that system. Again, typically this would be, you'd want to decrease the number of things that you scan, because the noisier you are, the easier it is to get caught. But that, again, I'm doing my best to simulate someone who's completely inept, because that's pretty close, at least on the pen testing side. So then from there, what I did is I actually took that proxy information and I ran a Nikto web scan on that open port. So as you can see, I've got Nikto, and the host that I'm wanting to scan is the loopback. Again, I'm telling it to use the proxy and its port. So this is where it's coming back to me and telling me some of the configuration information about the actual proxy server that I'm dealing with and that I'm trying to get access to. The thing that really jumps out to me is that there happens to be a site that is vulnerable to the Shellshock. And Shellshock, well, I have it on the next page, so I guess I shouldn't steal from myself. But again, there's a whole host of vulnerabilities and potential ways into this system. but this one just looked like, quite honestly, the easiest. Again, if you're actually people that are a little bit better at this probably wouldn't go around throwing Shellshock. It's a really super old vulnerability, and you can pretty well count on it getting caught if you throw it, if your victim has any network intrusion detection or host intrusion detection. So here's the actual CVE from MITRE. Basically, what it's telling us is that you just have to create a specialized string that essentially what it does is it reloads the environmental variables and actually runs the environmental variables if the system is vulnerable. So that's what it's talking about when it says it has trailing strings after the function. So essentially you end up throwing a semicolon. Actually, wait, I'll just show you the next slide. So the first thing I did here before I actually threw Shellshock at it is I set up a netcat listener to actually connect or listen for the connection coming back from the proxy server after I hit it with Shellshock. So that's the top screenshot. The bottom screenshot, I'm just showing you that I grabbed my IP address, which my attacker's IP address happened to be 165.206.189.11. Did I have to throw it back to that exact IP address? No. Would it be a better idea to throw it to another system that was listening for this traffic? Yeah, if you were trying to obfuscate and be a little bit sneaky, which I'm obviously not. But if you notice here, in the next portion, I'm literally just sending a single packet, doing a curl of the web server, or the proxy server, I should say. And I'm sending it the user agent. And then when I put that semicolon in there, that allows it to escape. And then when I open up a new bin, or I open up a new shell with bin bash interactive, and then I redirect that interactive bash shell to the netcat listener is what I'm doing here. And I'm running that through the proxy server to hit the vulnerable page on the web server. So after I send my curl command at it, I pretty much immediately get a shell here from my attacker PC that's listening. And you can see I do a quick who am I, and it comes back with the username that the web server is running under, which is the www data. You know, you can pretty well assume that from the way that the shell is formatted, that's who my user was, but you know, sometimes people do crazy things. So I figured I'd go ahead and just do that to double check it. So the next step that I do is I actually use enumeration script that I just grabbed off of GitHub there. So basically what I'm doing is I'm telling it to go ahead and pull the raw data from that GitHub script and run it locally on the system in another bash script. So this is kind of where I have my favorite joke is the difference between auditing script and an enumeration script is really who runs it. Because quite honestly, they're looking at pretty much the exact same things. You're looking for things like, you know, what user accounts are on the system, what software is on the system, any open files or vulnerable files. I mean, you're really doing the exact same thing. So yeah, it's not uncommon for attackers to actually go directly after the actual vulnerability systems inside an organization to get information about the systems inside so that they can minimize the amount of scanning that they actually have to do. So after running that script, I got a whole bunch of information and actually ended up finding a file that was created by root, which is the sysadmin on this Linux box. And it has write permissions by my user. So I can go in there and modify this file as this www data user instead of having to come in here as the root user and modify that. So the interesting thing about that particular file is it's a service that the system runs. I want to say it was like every 5 seconds or something like that. So every 5 seconds it would run that actual file, and it's actually set up to be a Python script. And you can tell that this was actually a system that was intentionally vulnerable. It's kind of one of those hack the box type things where, you know, you're kind of honing your pen testing skills and things like that. So it gives you a nice hint that it runs frequently and connects to things. So from there, basically what I did is I went in there and I set up a second netcat listener. And sorry that that came across so blurry. But that second netcat listener, I put on port 8080. And then I went into that file, that Python script, and cleared out the existing contents and put in my own contents to actually create a connection back to my attacker PC on that netcat listener. So you can see that I set it up with the connect to that IP address, the 8080. If you're wondering what those file numbers 0, 1, and 2, that would be your standard in, standard out, and standard error. And then I have it actually open up another bash shell is what that's actually launching at that point. So then from there, I go back to my other netcat listener and I can see that I actually get a connection, and I do a who am I, and it shows me that I am actually the root or the sysadmin. From there, basically what I did is I just catted the etc shadow file, which when you that's the file that you would use when you're trying to crack passwords and things like that, from an attacker's standpoint. So, you know, I just went after this individual system, and then I was, you know, the intent would be either to get user accounts that maybe you have admin password reusage on other systems, because I could definitely use this device to start trying to pivot into other systems and things like that. The other thing that I could do is, you know, since I have the web proxy, I could start doing things like introducing additional redirects of additional malicious sites and malicious content to start feeding bad things to the systems to try and spread out inside the environment horizontally. I mean, there's a whole host of things that you could do. You could run pivot scans through this thing and all sorts of stuff. But this is kind of where I stopped because, yeah, once you have admin on access on that thing, you can go 100 different ways. It really just kind of depends on what you're after. And for the purposes of this presentation, I was after generating traffic and some artifacts to kind of look at from a defender standpoint. So this is where we're going to switch hats, and we're going to go ahead and put our hoodie down. Yeah, I used the obligatory hacker in a hoodie with the GIFO mask. But now we're going to switch to our actual defender standpoint and kind of look at how the defender sees the same actions that we just went through as an attacker. So this is the actual network map of the systems that we're dealing with. So starting off our proxy, we have our proxy server. That's the 192.168.3.2. And that's connecting into our pfSense firewall. And our pfSense firewall, the WAN interface has the 165 address. We also have our security onion NIDS or HIDS solution, or NIDS and HIDS, I should say. And we have another virtual switch that actually is coming back to our physical network. The reason that I have some of these in green is that is where our security onion device actually has additional interfaces. So it can actually see the traffic that's going on those 3 switches. So our web proxy, again, I downloaded this one from VulnHub. There's where you can get it if you decide you want to play with it. It's just a standard vulnerable VM that's providing web proxy functionality. You know, generally not a good idea to leave your web proxy open to the internet. Not certain why one would do such a thing, but you know, maybe you're too cheap to or can't afford to put up a VPN, but you can at least see some traffic, or you're wanting to redirect some stuff for your users that may be at their house. So the next thing that I used was Security Onion. I guess I should preface with everything that I put inside this solution is open source software. I did that intentionally because I work for state government, so I understand that sometimes budgets can be constrained. So you kind of have to sometimes work with what you can work with. Downside to a lot of the open source stuff is it requires a lot more development and understanding, and sometimes you have to pick who you deal with so that you can actually get support, because not every open source project offers reliable support. But yeah, Security Onion is an open source SIEM solution. It is free to use in production, and it does have commercial support available. So that that picture that I have down there with the data types, that's just some of the general information that you can find about the Security Onion on their website. I've dealt with them in the past in other avenues. Really solid piece of software for the open source community. And if you don't have anything, I would highly encourage you to, you know, take a look at this one and see if it, you know, fits your needs. So pfSense, that's an open source router. Again, free to use in production. Commercial support is available. It does have multiple plugins to provide next-gen firewall functionality. You've got things like web filtering, and you've got Suricata, where you can actually do signature detection and things like that. For how I have this one configured, I used a default installation. Aside from the standard default installation, I added a couple of different interfaces to allow for the additional networks. And I added a network address translation for the proxy server, and I configured syslog forwarding of the of all the events to Security Onion. So again, just wanted to rehash the network map now that you kind of know what we're working with. So we've got our Security Onion in the bottom, our pfSense in the middle, our proxy server on top, and our WAN interface going out the left side. So I kind of put together a brief storyboard. You know, the general concept is kind of walk in for the beginning of the day. We're going to have to make a couple assumptions here since I don't have noise in this system. Everything that we're seeing is assumed to be above baseline for the normal traffic load. So we basically pop in here and we see that we do have some activity that's above normal, nothing that, you know, depending on how wildly your business fluctuates, probably something that would pretty easily go unnoticed if you're just looking at the spikes of logs and traffic and stuff like that. So we're scrolling down the home page here of the SecOnion, and you can see that we have some different log types based off of the different type of sensor. We've got your you've got your Zeek logs. I stumble there because it used to be called Bro, and as you can see, it actually still has the term Bro in the log type as well. Actually, I'm going to go back one quick second. So if you look along the, not the far left, but the second column from the left-hand side, you'll see that you actually have the data is categorized. That's your navigation. So we're actually on the home page, which is where it dumps you when you first sign into the system. So you have the different types of alert data. You've got the Zeek notices, last alert, HIDs, and NIDs alerts. And these are all just different dashboards that are kind of rolling up your data to make it easier for you as an analyst to kind of find what it is you're looking for. Below that, you have the Zeek hunting. All of those items are artifacts that the Zeek parsing engine actually extracts out for you so that you can start seeing different events depending on what it is you're looking at. So again, if you wanted to look strictly at web traffic, you know, you've got HTTP there, stuff like that. So as you come down, you actually see the host hunting. So that has the auto runs, beats, OSSEC, and Sysmon. So this is where you would see data from your actual host agents. So for the purposes of this exercise, what I did is I actually hacked the box a couple of times. I had to hack the box the first time so that I could actually install the host agent on to the web proxy server so that I could hack it a second time so that you could actually see what the agent would catch when I was getting it the second time. And then below that, you can see that, you know, you have other log sources like, you know, syslog, firewalls, stuff like that. So we'll continue scrolling down that home page. Just wanted to make sure I oriented you a little bit. As you can see there in the bottom right-hand corner, we've got some OSSEC alerts, and we've also got some NIDS, or network intrusion detection, alerts as well. So we keep scrolling down, and this actually gives us the summary of kind of what alerts we're actually seeing on this system. So that's a lot of information, and quite honestly, it's not super user-friendly unless you're dealing with WASA alerts and the NIDS alerts from the snort, to unless you've been dealing with them for a while, understanding exactly what it's telling you, it's not going to be super helpful. So I went back up to the alert data at this point and said, okay, let's go ahead and click into the HIDS data to look at the host alerts. So we're going to actually be focusing in on what kind of data we're seeing on the actual systems themselves from the agents that are installed on them. And again, this is also open source, Windows compatible and Mac compatible. So when we look on the right-hand side here, they have the OSSEC alerts categorized by level. It looks like we've got stuff ranging from 1 to 15. So the quick, easy question is, okay, which ones do I really care about? So when we go to the OSSEC pages, if you look at kind of how they classify these, it looks like the level 15s are the severe attack. That means there's, we definitely need to look at it. There's no way that this was an accident. It's something actually happened on our system. So we better go check that out. Again, obviously, if you're working in an environment where you have multiple people, you want to make sure that you're processing your alerts and events in accordance with whatever your local policy is, based off of the importance of not only the system, but the severity of the alert, things like that. So basically what I did is I went ahead and clicked on that level 15. And if you see in the top left-hand corner there, it actually applied a filter. So it's saying that the alert level is equal to 15. And that actually brings us down to just 5 alerts. And as you can see, there's a description saying that, hey, the Shellshock attack was detected. And it was detected on my web proxy, or my agent that's named web proxy. And there was 5 of those logs. So we scroll down to that the actual logs for that event, and this is an expanded view of that event. And it's telling me, hey, that IP address is the 192.168.3.2, which again coincides with our actual web proxy. But the interesting thing here is that as we look at that, it looks like the source IP of that attack is coming from 127.0.0.1. So that means that's coming from the loopback address. Well, since we took the route of seeing the attacker first, we kind of know that we ran the attack through the proxy. So we're seeing the same thing, but on the opposite side of the house. And we see that even in our tool here, it's giving us the same link to the MITRE page to go check out that vulnerability. We've already talked about that particular vulnerability, so I'm going to skip past this one. So, you know, I took a wild stab and I just said, okay, let's go ahead and let's go back to the home page and check across all of our sensors and see if where Shellshock is being used and see what we get back for alerts. So after I put in Shellshock for my keyword, it looks like I've got 123 agent alerts or OSSEC alerts and 2 network alerts. That's coming from my Snort parsing engine. So I went ahead and went all the way down to those logs, and I figured I'd go take a look at those Snort alerts. So the interesting thing on those Snort alerts is it looks like the Snort alerts are actually coming in from that 165.206.189.11 IP address, and it is bound for the proxy information associated with my proxy server. So as you'll notice here, you've actually got 2 different instances of the attack. I did throw it twice because I bombed out on it the first time. So what we did there is then we clicked on the actual IP address. I'm actually going to go back. I clicked on the IP address of the source IP. And what that does is that focuses in on that IP address and gives me kind of a holistic view of what's going on from that specific IP address. And it looks like we've got a whole bunch of bro notices and 1 OSSEC notice. When I come down to the logs and look at what's going on, you'll notice that we still actually have an active connection going on. That's because Mr. Van Haften forgot to actually go disable that Python script that was attempting to connect back to the system. So the web proxy just kept attempting to connect. Sloppy hackers. I don't know what to tell you. Sloppy hackers. If the other interesting thing that you'll notice on this page is when you look at the source IP addresses, you're seeing the source IP of both the web proxy server and the firewall. Again, remember we had the traffic being mirrored from both the external interface of the firewall and the internal interface of where the web proxy was connected into the firewall. So from this point, I actually clicked into the ID on the far right-hand side, and it pulls up the actual PCAP it pulls up a web page where I can download the actual PCAP if I want to, and it does some base processing of it so that you can look at it. But when I look at that traffic, it shows me that no data was sent here. That's what I've got kind of highlighted there. So nothing super interesting in this particular packet. So at that point, I go back and I actually start filtering out things like 0-byte responses and rejected connections and stuff like that. That's going to make it harder for me to find what it is that I'm after. Those are not super interesting packets for the purposes of my investigation. So after I filter those out, that gets me, again, just wanted to make sure that you saw, that we're seeing that traffic on both the the proxy server and the external interface of the firewall. But at that point, I've actually clicked into the ID information so that I can see a packet that actually has some data in it. And I'm looking at stuff that actually went out the firewall. So that's the 165.206.182, 188.2. And this is where I actually see the attacker doing the who am I and coming back with information saying that they're root and dumping the shadow file. So super scary when you first look at this, especially knowing kind of what you know from seeing the attacker side. Honestly, if I were to ever come across a packet like this, I would be jumping for joy, because a packet like this is very straightforward in my analysis as far as what's going on. And quite honestly, if they were this sloppy, it's probably going to be pretty easy to prosecute them. You're having you've got a lot of good information as far as maintaining that trail of evidence. And again, if they're that sloppy, there's a good chance they're hacking from home or a place where you can actually find them and authorities can deal with them. So at that point, we found interesting things, but we aren't quite ready to wrap up our investigation yet. We know that they got on there, but we still don't necessarily know how they got on there. Well, we know that they threw Shellshock at us, and we see that they got on the system, but we still need to go back and say, okay, what else actually happened? So we also noticed that they had a connection on port 443 previously. So we go ahead and take a look at those packets, and that shows us kind of the Python script where I was actually changing those files. It shows you, obviously I opened it with VI. That's why you got the WQ up there. And that I actually modified that file to connect back to my own attacker PC. So again, we would actually want to continue on with our investigation, find additional information about that particular system, figure out, exactly where that, we'd go back and we'd actually find the instance of Shellshock being thrown at our proxy server. We'd go back and there's a bunch of logs that you can actually see information like the NICTO scanner. If you, by default, the way I ran it, it tells you right in its user agent that it is a NICTO scanner that's running. Again, Kali is intended to be almost an auditing tool more than an attacker's tool, but yeah, you can go in there and you can manipulate that stuff to make it obfuscate that information. But this is just kind of bringing home, here's some of the capabilities. And even if you can't necessarily go out there and buy the latest and greatest solution, simply having something like Security Onion, where it's catching your network traffic, gathering logs from your systems, doing things like that, creating an easy way to import and export that data, because everything that you saw there can actually be exported as a CSV. The different log types, before, after filtering, however you kind of want to handle it. That really helps when, even if you don't have the expertise on staff to handle incident response, you've got you may not be able to catch the crooks, but at least you had the video camera running. So when you do call the police or call somebody to come in and do an investigation on that, you have a whole bunch of information that you can turn over to them, where they can start and they can help you digest that information, or those times where you do have to call in somebody that is used to dealing with things like these. But things that we should be thinking about is how would you, or when I say you, I'm meaning your organization, respond to a password dump of a system. I mean, what kind of actions would you take at that point? Are we simply going to have users change their passwords? What about system accounts? How far reaching are our system accounts? Do we have good information about the processes and procedures for doing things like that? Because that's something that, obviously that account was compromised, or the accounts that were on there could easily have been compromised. So that's things that we want to make sure that, as you're filling out that playbook that Ryan started off there, things you should definitely be thinking about. And honestly, from my standpoint, I'm thankful that each and every one of you are doing something like that. I absolutely love the fact that Ryan does a lot of those things. It makes my life tremendously more, simplifies my life, I'll put it that way. And so anything you can do to help your staff out, at least have a plan in place, that more power to that. I would definitely can't emphasize that enough. So, another question that you might be asking yourself pertaining to this as a defender is, why did we have that Python script on that system running as root? What was that actually intended for? Why was that thing trying to connect out to systems? Why wasn't the system patched? Shellshock is a vulnerability from 2014. So that's a very, very old, very, very nasty vulnerability. The reason it wasn't patched in this instance is obviously we wanted something easy to pop and show. But again, you can still find instances of systems that are vulnerable to shell shock out in the wild. So just things you need to make sure that you think about. I mean, we've talked about Eternal Blue, and everybody's probably rolling their eyes just hearing that. But again, that was back in that was 2016, 2017. So that there's still systems out there that are vulnerable to that as well. And again, does this device need to be accessible from the internet? If our real intent is to get our users running our web proxy and things like that, does it make more sense to do something where we're using like an always on VPN or something like that? So that's kind of the general things that I just, quickly jotted down that, we would want to definitely follow up on. Lots more than this. That system had a whole bunch of problems, but that's some things that you definitely want to be thinking about, and make sure that you come back to a round table and fix those underlying problems as to why they got into the system in the first place. All right, I think at this point I'm going to pass this back to Ryan.
Yep, and we'll take it back and we'll take questions at the end. And again, if you want to see this system live and some of the stuff, Mike can go through that. We'll stop recording and answer questions there at the end. But right now, real quick, I want to jump back to the sample incident response plan and kind of go over that very, very quickly. Again, apologies for not having that ready before. I thought I had it done, but I did not. All right. So again, if you note the kind of the highlighted areas, again, those are what you want to tailor to your organization to kind of come up with a quick and easy plan. So in this case, we have kind of the help desk is kind of the central repository first call notified entity. So you want them to capture pertinent information. Again, just to highlight going down, we don't want to put personal identifiable information or protected health information into an issue tracking system. You know, the kind of the first line of defense, what they can do is kind of the initial business impact to include the escalations and who the notified entity needs to start notifying themselves. And spell out the incident response team needs to be activated, and then kind of the call tree notification for that. And then kind of do an initial categorization, and then that can start kicking off. If we do kind of get our incident response team involved, or even just a security team, if it doesn't rise to the big level, you start getting into some of those procedures and playbooks down here. Again, these are just some of the common attack vectors that we talked about earlier here, highlighted under item number 6. And then just have some of the actions that can be taken. Again, this isn't all encompassing. This is kind of quick. I mean, pretty much your procedures and your actions, your playbook is going to be, we can make this hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages long, but we don't want to do that. If you need to escalate to an outside entity, that's an important piece here under bullet number 8. Again, just in the Iowa area, Pratum, ProCircular, those are the kind of, you want to call that out beforehand and have the contracts and mechanisms in place to be able to engage those entities. It's not, while a breach is ongoing and you don't know what to do, you want to have that planned out ahead of time. And then again, your containment, eradication, and recovery is kind of all through here. And then item number 14, kind of your after action review. What you want to do, what steps you want to take to document and improve. And then the last piece, if you're only going to fill out one portion of this, this is probably the most important. This is just getting even down. I think the total document 7 pages, 5 pages we had kind of in the plan. But if you just want to get even tighter, down to 2 pages, here's a good kind of checklist to make sure you got the preliminary assessment, you got those items detailed and information captured. You have your internal company and local notifications, law enforcement if you need to be. One note here, there is a requirement to notify the Iowa Attorney General's office if there is a security breach or incident that impacts 500 Iowans. So if you're losing personal information or personal health information has been breached, that's kind of the threshold where you need to notify state entities. And then of course you have the federal notification. Hopefully, of course, it's going to lock up. And then the last page just kind of talks about public notification. Again, does the breach trigger Iowa Code 715C? The contact person, kind of your public affairs, public information officer, what you want to do, issuing press release. Do you have to arrange for credit monitoring? Those types of things. And then of course, one of the most important parts, again, just to emphasize that, is completing a summary report after the breach is complete and improving our incident response capability and program. All right, so just real quick, want to kind of highlight, some of the folks you can reach out to here at the ICN for any of our services, or to learn more about any of the security things that we offer, or even just to arrange a visit with us. Mike and I like to travel and get out of the office, even now if it's virtually during COVID. We're glad to do that, spend some time with you talking about anything security related. So Tammy Rodriguez and John O'Connor cover a lot of our agency customers. Dana Richardson covers our healthcare, and their sales engineer is Mark Dayton. Joe Jaden and Pat McGinty cover our education customers. Steve Schweir does a lot of E-rate, so he can help you guys find some money. And then Mike Lauer is their sales engineer. Again, just kind of a quick look at some of the services and things that we offer. Obviously, internet and Ethernet data services are our biggest thing. We offer voice as long as it's not to healthcare entities, as well as some of the security offerings that we have and some of the new things that we're starting to roll out here into the future. Here's Mike and I's contact information. Again, reach out with anything that you may have when it comes to security, anything that you've seen here, anything you want to learn more about, or just, again, bounce questions off of, validate what you're doing when it comes to your security program and the tools and technologies and the people and processes that you have. We're glad to help out in any way that we can. Jump backwards. And with that, we will open it up to the question portion. I believe there's a Q&A feature where you can just go ahead and type in if you have any questions. If we could go ahead and stop recording at this point too.